Hello, thank you for joining me on this chapter on nervous system. So this is first of several chapters during which we will cover this system in a fair bit of detail. During this first chapter, we will be looking at the general characteristics of this system as well as the cells involved. And then on the subsequent chapters, we will be looking in more detail different areas of this system. So let's start with a little discussion as for why I think that this is probably one of the most fascinating systems of the human body. As I may have mentioned in the past, much of my work has focused on the study of the heart, and especially how heart muscle tissue behaves in the magnetic resonance imaging setting. And I often say that the heart is definitely one of the most fascinating organs in the body. And although I love the topic, that is not really how I ended up in the field. Instead, I would say that in my humble opinion, the heart is the second most fascinating organ in the body. I actually started my career looking much more into the functional neuroimaging, so the studying the nervous system in action, and in particular the brain. And this is a fascinating field. And if you wish, one of my first loves in this field. A lot of these studies, as you can see an example on the right bottom corner, although it's not my, the cross section between anatomy and physiology, and neuroscience, and psychology. So the brain is really, I would dare to say, the most complex organ of ours, and also the most interesting one to study. And I wanted to include this picture of a preserved brain and spinal cord that have been isolated and put inside a storage container. This one, in fact, is from 1935 and housed at the National Museum of Health and Medicine. But what this and the following pictures tell beautifully in my mind is that the brain and the spinal cord are really all that you are. It is within the brain that you experience of yourself. Your self-awareness, knowledge of all things that you are, and experience. They all are produced there. So that is the very essential of you. And I would even dare to go as far as claiming that everything else in your body is just casing and supporting structures to protect and store and maintain these parts. So that is a thought to start with when considering the importance of the nervous system. And another thing that I want to highlight in this introduction to the topic is that there are a lot of great case examples that have allowed us to build our current understanding of the human nervous system. And one classic in this field is the book by a neurologist called Oliver Sacks. His book from 1985 called Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat describes a variety of case histories of his patients, and these sometimes peculiar stories give us more light and foundation for understanding how the brain works. And one of these stories is about Dr. P, who suffered from visual agnosia. And I think that this picture beautifully begins to explain what visual agnosia is like. Are you seeing a man or a woman on a rock? So in visual agnosia, there is an impaired recognition of visually presented object. Like on these pictures, the patient is able to copy by drawing what they see, but when asked what it is, this is giving it a meaning. It becomes obvious that they do not see what they are seeing. For example, for the first one, and these are real patient answers, they could say, I don't know. And for the second could be a dog or any other animal. And then could be a branch or a stump. and for the last one of these, a wagon or a car of some sort. So all these examples show that there is nothing wrong with the vision as such, or the intelligence of an individual, as was the case with Dr. P, but it is the recognition of the stimulus presented that is affected. And this was indeed the case with the patient who saw his wife as a hat, and tried to put her on a hat shelf and so on. And you can imagine that this did not go down well. So now, based on the information that we have gathered, we know it is the occipital lobe of the brain and possibly also temporal lobe that were affected in this patient. This is how these case histories add up to our knowledge and understanding of the nervous system. Another famous case history that you might have heard about is the story of Phineas Gage. He was an American railway construction foreman. And one time that he was working with black powder, which you put into the holes drilled into the rock to explode the rock away, he was punching the black powder in and by accident caused the black powder to explode too early. And a large iron rod was driven completely through his head and brain inside it. As a result, much of the left frontal lobe of Phineas was destroyed. And you can even see his skull on a display in a museum these days. And this is because of what we have learned about the nervous system, because of the damage that he experienced. Well, he lived for another 12 years or so, but what was important was that his personality changed due to this damage to the brain. He became irritable, rude, abrupt, and this was not at all his original personality. In fact, his friends described that he was no longer the Gage. So the reason why I wanted to share these two stories with you was to show that the nervous system is really a fascinating one, and we have so much to learn about it. In fact, every day, even still, we are learning something new about the nervous system. So this is going to be the topic of the rest of our course. And if you have spare time in your hands, read through some of these fascinating case stories. You will soon start to make connections between these and what you are learning. Let's move on to the actual chapter content and start by discussing what is nervous system. And no, it is not about being anxious or nervous as the term means as an adjective. Instead, nervous system is all about communication and control of the body. While at the beginning of the AMP2 course, we will look at the endocrine system in more detail. This is how hormones are used to control the body and pass messages throughout it. The nervous system is the other one of these two control and communication systems in the body. So while hormones are passed through the body and are therefore slower active, but signals last in the body for a longer time, the nervous system is fast impulses that are very specific from where and to where they are passed. These messages are passed in the nervous system in two forms, as electrical and chemical signals. And we will spend quite some time talking about the electric propagation of a nerve impulse throughout the neuron. But that is not all. Once the message reaches the end of a nerve cell's axon, known as axon terminal, for it to pass to another nerve cell, we must use another method than just an electrical impulse. This is because electrical impulses cannot jump from one nerve cell to another. So what happens instead is that the message from one nerve cell to another over the small gap, known as synapses, is passed in a chemical format. These chemical compounds are known as our neurotransmitters, and we will talk more about them later in this chapter. So nervous system works through electrical and chemical signals, and these signals are fast, specific, and result in almost immediate reactions. This is in a big contrast to how endocrine system works, but we will leave that system for AMP2 course. Now, if we think of the functions of the nervous system, there are three that we should know, and they overlap each other. Let's review these. The first of these, sensory input, is all about gathering information of body's internal and external state. To gather this information, we use sensory organs. These would include our smell and taste, sight, hearing and balance, as well as touch and position. So it is all about bringing in information to the central nervous system. This is our brain mainly. And sensory information refers to the info about the world around us and the state of our body in it. Next, we will need to process this information somehow. So this is all about choosing what information is relevant, analyzing many sources of it, summing it, and giving it meanings. And based on these meanings, we must decide what to do about it. And what to do, this would be, of course, all about some sort of output. And for the most part, this output acting on the stimulus that we are presented to is motor responses. So these would be through effectors, which could include, for example, muscles and glands and so on. So does this remind you about the homeostatic control mechanism loop? It should, as this is exactly what it does. We discussed this earlier, but if you have forgotten what homeostasis and the mechanism loop was all about, I will link a video about that to the end of this one here. Or if you wish, you could summarize the functions of the nervous system with this diagram too. Well, for the rest of this video, I want to discuss with you about a few different ways that we can use to divide the nervous system in. Let's have a look at this. So one and the most common way to do this is by dividing the nervous system in two parts based on the structures and functions. Let's look at this division. We have central nervous system, which I will abbreviate as CNS, and peripheral nervous system, abbreviated as PNS. We will look at both of these in sections. The CNS is made of the brain and the spinal cord that is attached to it at the bottom. And these both are located, as I am sure you remember from the beginning of our course, in the dorsal cavity of the body. And if we think of their functions, they are control and integration centers. It is within brain and in some instances also at the level of the spinal cord, where sensory stimuli are interpreted and from where the motor output is initiated and controlled from. So let's look at the PNS. Peripheral nervous system contains really the portions of nervous system that are outside the CNS. So most of these nerves are those that extend from the brain and spinal cord. These are the spinal nerves, which run to and from the spinal cord, and the cranial nerves, which run to and from the brain. You can consider the PNS to include the receivers, communication lines, and actors outside the CNS. So these are the ones that we need to know here. And next we will be looking at two functions of the peripheral nervous system in a little more detail. And what I want to discuss here is the sensory and motor divisions of the peripheral nervous system. So sensory division is also known as the afferent part. It brings messages to the CNS. And we have two types of fibers here. The somatic fibers carry impulses from the skin, skeletal muscles, and the joints, while visceral fibers carry messages from the visceral organs, of course. But note that all of these messages are going into the CNS. Then let's have a look at the motor division. Here impulses are transported from the CNS to the effector organs. And these would include, for example, muscles and various glands. We have two divisions here: somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system, which I want to discuss as they are important for the physiological responses that we see. And I want us to look at the autonomic one in particular. So somatic nervous system is voluntary, driving the movements and actions that we have a conscious control over. The autonomic one is involuntary. These we cannot choose to do, or to a large part of it is unconscious to. And these are the two branches of the autonomic nervous system that I want to talk about. You might have heard about the sympathetic nervous system as our fight or flight system. These are responses to, for example, stressful situations such as excitement, fear, anger, embarrassment, and so on. What we typically see on a physiological level is that when this system is activated, the heart rate goes up. And same happens for the blood pressure, while also respiratory system, at the bronchi in particular, dilate to facilitate more air to be moved in. At the same time, the digestive system can slow down as it is not in an immediate need, as we are fighting for our survival, if you wish. But we can also see the blood vessels dilating in order to bring more blood to the muscles and so on. So these are all about the physiological responses that aim to keep us alive in short time, if you wish to use that as a mnemonic. Then again, you might know the parasympathetic nervous system as our rest and digest system. It is all about chilling and how you might feel, for example, after a nice meal when you are relaxing and taking it easy. Some of the physiological changes that we see when this system is activated are the pupils constricting, heart rate, and blood pressure going down. Instead, not that we are worried about the immediate threat. We are processing food, for example, and the digestive system activities as well as salivation are higher than normal. And same goes for the urine and feces processing. Respiratory system bronchi would constrict. So can you see how these two are almost opposite reactions or systems, right? And this is where I want to finish this video. In the next activity area of our course, you will be looking at the neurons and their supporting cells. I will catch you there.